Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're really excited to speak with you today. Today's topic is going to be unlocking sponsored products profit with a perfect campaign. So we're going to cover everything from campaign structure to strategy to actions you can take to improve profitability. We are very excited to have a special guest on the webinar with us today. We have Commerce Canal, which is an agency helping sellers with brick and mortar businesses establish their e-commerce presence. We're really excited to have Ryan from e-commerce joining us today, and we'll introduce him in just a minute. We have a lot of really good content for you. I'm really excited. So for your speakers today, so I'm Gary Iyengar. I'm the manager of product education here at Takeometrics. If you've ever been in our product already, if you've looked at our help center, you would have seen my head floating around. So I'm excited to be hosting this webinar today. I'm joined by my colleagues Mike and Seth, both of whom have a lot of interaction with sellers and a lot of expertise. So they have a lot of good information to share. Mike?
Hi everyone, this is Mike Indigaro. I lead partnerships and business development here at Takeometrics. More specifically, I work with agencies to develop an ecosystem to support our sellers additionally from our software platform, and that's where I've been able to interact with Ryan and the Commerce Canal team.
Hi everyone, my name is Seth Lapointe. I'm a customer success manager here. Basically what I do is I partner up with sellers and help them get set up within our software, make sure that they're trained and set up for success.
Yeah, and Seth also has a lot of experience managing campaigns himself as well. So.
Yep.
If you have any questions throughout the webinar today, guys, feel free to write in. You'll see a little questions box. We have teammates on hand to answer them, and we'll try to address as many of them live as possible as well. And without further ado, our guest speaker for today, Ryan Craver. Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, everyone. Looking forward to discussing one of my favorite topics in relation to Amazon. My name is Ryan Craver. I'm the founder and CEO of an agency called Commerce Canal. We represent all sorts of brands on both Seller Central and Vendor Central. And they range from apparel companies like New Balance and Asics and Saucony to smaller programs that are young entrepreneurial brand startups that are just getting onto the platform. We manage everything cradle to grave, including the listings, the FBA fulfillment, the planning, as well as disposal, and of course, marketing, which is the conversation for today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. So everyone, right off the bat, we're going to get into our first poll question of the day. So I'm going to launch that right now. This is just for us to get an idea for sort of the level of familiarity everyone has with sponsored products and topics. So we just want to know if you've attended a Takeometrics webinar before. We'll probably use, some jargon and some terminology. If any of that is confusing or you have questions, please let us know. We'll try to clarify ourselves as much as possible. So I've launched that poll. I'm going to leave it up for a couple of minutes. If you do want to check out some of our previous webinars, if you haven't had a chance to attend them, or you're new to Amazon and sponsored products, we're going to drop a link into the chat box to our marketing site. That's going to allow you to review webinar recordings from the past. So we're just going to give a couple more seconds for a few more people to cast their vote. And that's, like I said, that's just going to help us align our content. And then look for the link in the chat box if you do want to review previous webinar recordings. And just for your information, we will also be sharing a recording of this webinar shortly. So probably in the next couple of days after we've broadcast today, you should see a recording coming through if you do want to refer back to it. While we're putting the link in there, if you guys also want to write in and let us know where you're joining us from today, we're always curious to know where our listeners are. Like I said, we're in Boston. Ryan's dialing in from New York. We'd love to hear where you are from as well. Perfect. I'm going to close out that poll. And it looks like most people have either attended one this year or haven't attended one at all. So it's a pretty even split there. So definitely encourage you to look at those recordings if you haven't attended, and if you have attended one this year, welcome back. We're excited to have you here. Perfect. So just so you know what's coming, the purpose of this webinar is is going to be focused around profitability. So there are a lot of strategies that you could employ with sponsored products management. The ones we discussed today are going to be geared towards improving profits, and particularly around how you can improve profitability with the right kind of campaign, whether it's campaign structure, whether it's the keywords in that campaign. We're going to go through some actual actionable strategies you can go ahead and implement for your own account. So our agenda for today, it's pretty succinct. We're going to review campaign structure with you, just so we're all on the same page. We're going to review those strategies that I mentioned. We have 5 to share with you today, but we're going to give you all sorts of action items, and Ryan's going to be chiming in as well, based on what he has seen be successful with his clients. And then we have a couple of links for you, free trial links coming up, link to sign up for a new product, the flywheel, that's coming up as well, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And then once that's done, we're going to wrap up with some takeaways, and then open the floor for Q&A. But don't wait until the end for questions. Anytime you have them, feel free to submit them. Like I said, we have team monitoring the question box, and we'll try to answer them live as well. Perfect. So without further ado, let's go into our campaign structure review.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is Seth speaking here. So I'm going to be walking you guys through, how to properly structure your campaigns and some sort of best practices. This is basically what I do on a day-to-day basis. So the first slide here. So this is just about campaign structure here. So basically, the idea here is we recommend grouping your products by relevancy as well as margins and objectives. Also, having your ad groups set up to further characterize a product will help you give you a better understanding of where your keywords are being generated, and also your automatic and manual campaigns should be set up in a mirrored structure. This will allow for better organization and accuracy when taking actions. All right, and next. So let's just quickly go over the difference between an automatic and manual campaign. We already know to create the corresponding manual campaign for every automatic. This allows for efficient management for growing your catalog. So basically what's going on here is your automatic campaign is casting a wide net to gather search term data, and then your manual is adding those keywords based on that search term data to exploit and better target your audience.
Perfect. So with anything, an example always helps. So we have this one here that Seth's going to walk us through. It's a little on the nose. We do have an actual mirror on the slide.
So this is pretty cool. So basically the idea here is to have the same naming convention, which will help you stay organized when you're adding those keywords. So basically when I set up campaigns for sellers, I actually kind of take it a little bit further, and in the name, the campaign name, I'll actually add the product margin, because this is important because products with a 10% margin will have a much different goal and ACoS target than something with, say, a 50% margin. So here you'll see, for example, we got pillows, auto, launch. Within that, the ad groups are memory foam pillows, feather pillows, and down pillows.
Yep.
And Ryan, this is a quick question for you. In working with some of your clients as an agency, what are the types of things that you're doing to actually start these campaigns? I mean, do you have a good idea of their catalog and what to actually add to sponsor products? How do you actually get to the point where you're like, okay, these are the products I'm going to sponsor, and then I'm going to put them into this mirrored campaign structure?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I could probably argue that the upfront setup and the structure of how you're going to start to buy your campaigns is probably the most important step to any launch. Obviously, you have to figure out how to merchandise your product correctly first, but then I love how Teikametrics put this up front, because this is the biggest portion of the strategy that's going to lead to future benefit in the future. So if we take some examples outside of the sleep world, figuring out if we take something like pet accessories. So we have a current client that has the licenses for all of the major league teams, the NBA, the NFL, and they're selling all these various accessories across jerseys, across leashes, across collars, anything that you can put on a dog or a cat. So you take the catalog, you sit back and you say, okay, which classifications do we need to buy specifically for? So collars, leashes, which particular teams or leagues do we need to buy specifically for? And then do they overlap in those classifications? So we took a step back and said, okay, we not only have to buy by the classification, but we're going to have to buy the keywords for the teams within the classification, and then we're going to have to buy generals as well. So stepping back, that allowed us to figure out the right structure. So then once Teikametrics took over and highlighted to us the negative keywords, the keywords that we need to move from autos to manuals, we had that much more data and that much more flexibility to make those changes and figure out where everything should sit. So I can't encourage enough, before you just start buying keywords, make sure you've got a structure set up, because over time, those learnings are going to make the system better. It's going to prioritize what you're buying, and it's going to use your most efficient use of funds possible.
Yeah, the campaign structure is really the foundation for your house here. So you might want to make sure it's set up correctly. Otherwise, you might find your house maybe sinking down to the ground a little bit, and we definitely don't want that. As we go along today, we'll also have some more advanced campaign structure that you might want to implement as you move towards profitability, but we just want to set a baseline here for maybe what the life cycle of a campaign looks like as well.
Yeah, so this here is the life cycle of a campaign. So basically, so the idea here is the launch phase is it's sort of there for gaining exposure, sales rank, and driving new traffic. The idea is to reach a wide audience to gather as much data as possible. Some metrics to watch there is would be impressions and clicks. So next would be the growth phase. So when you're in the growth phase, basically what you're trying to do is just improve conversion and move closer to your ACoS target. Some metrics to look for there would be, sales and orders. And then the next step here would be the profit. So at this stage, you're looking to drive revenue while maintaining the most efficient ad spend rather.
Exactly, and it's important to keep in mind that this life cycle is really linear, so there's not a way to skip ahead to one stage without having gone through the one before.
Yeah.
So a lot of our strategies are going to focus on the last section, which is the profit stage, but there's not a way to get there without investing in the launch and growth phases prior to.
Exactly.
Perfect. So some of the strategies we're going to be sharing with you today, and we'll definitely dive into more detail into every single one of these, but we're going to go through different campaign organization techniques. So we showed you the mirror campaign structure. We're going to show you some variations on that. We're going to establish, a negative keyword strategy, especially as you're trying to be more profitable. The ways to use search term data to create new keywords, handling campaign budgets. All of us talk to sellers on a daily basis, and I know I encounter budget questions a lot because it's hard to come up with the right amount to set. So we're going to talk you through that. And then last but not least, establishing a bidding strategy to make sure that the bids that you're setting are in fact profitable for you. Before we dive into that, I want to launch another poll here. So on this poll question, you could select as many options as apply to you, but essentially before we dive into each one of these in more detail, I just want to get an idea for which strategies you may already have tried. And then if you also want to write and let us know what the results of those strategies were and what worked and didn't work for you. So you should see that poll on your screen right now. And while that's up, a question from Robert around whether it's better to start with less keywords or more. We'll go more into keyword strategy in just a few minutes, Robert, but the goal really is to have the right keywords, not so much the number of keywords that you have in a particular campaign.
Yeah, and like Ryan mentioned, you really want to set up those automatic campaigns as a data source to mine all that search data that comes from Amazon. So what happens is when you set up that automatic campaign, it pulls all the data from your listings and allows you to see how shoppers are finding your products. And there's plenty of tools out there that will help you come up with keywords, and you can stuff those into manual campaigns. But there is not one asset that's greater on Amazon than having shopper search term data, right? As an Amazon seller, you don't have access to the shopper's email or phone number, but
or even demographic information.
Right, but what you have is how they searched and potentially converted on your product. So you want to be able to take that data that you're mining out of the automatic campaign and bring it over to the manual campaign, where you can now, instead of having your automatic ads sit out there for the shoppers to come to, you can create these manual ads and have those ads be placed more strategically in front of the customer.
Exactly.
Very, 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 very well said. If I can just jump in, I think what I preach to my team is this is the one time you can get Amazon to do all the hard work for you. It seeks and destroys. And an example is we represent sleepwear for Hanes. Mm-hmm. Hanes, typically when we're buying competitive keywords, we would associate them with Fruit of the Loom or someone like that. But what we found through our automatic campaigns is brands like Nike, Adidas, and some other ones that would be thought to be active or athletic or athleisure wear brands that you don't usually associate with Hanes were driving a lot of actual purchases. And so we use that information from Amazon to tell us what competitors out there actually were driving some of our business. So let them do the hard work for you and then just exploit it.
Perfect. Great, so I'm going to close out the poll we just had and share some of the results here. It looks like keywords and budgets are where a lot of people have experience, which makes sense because people are familiar with the concept of keywords and setting up manual campaigns, and I'm sure everyone has gotten those alerts from Amazon asking them to increase their budgets when they run out. Mm-hmm. But the other strategies are just as important. We'll give you a lot more information. So if you haven't tried them yet, this is your chance to implement to get more profitable campaigns. So let's dive into our first strategy, which is considering different campaign organization techniques. So you start off with the mirror campaign structure, but there are some variations you can evolve your campaigns into.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So in a traditional campaign configuration structure, you're looking at setting up your campaigns based on typically product type and objective. So within that mirrored campaign structure, you have your automatic campaign, and that automatic campaign is going to more or less have all of the similar types of products. So you're not going to create a campaign that has, a rain boot and a jacket in the same campaign, but you want to start to build out these campaigns to those product types and objectives. And you also want to consider setting up based on product lifecycle and audience keywords. So that's where you start to get a little bit more strategic. So the first basic type of breaking down your campaigns is product type. And this is essentially just organizing similar products by category or style. So you would have, an automatic campaign that you would create that's going to have all of your rain jackets. And then following that mirrored campaign structure, you're going to have a manual campaign with those same rain jackets in it so that you can start to pull that data out, put it into the manual campaign. Going further, you can start to set up campaigns based on product life cycles. So, having all of your products by product type in the same campaign, well, now you can start to break that up based on those same products having differences in season or some having needed liquidation. You can start to break those out. And the reason why you want to break those out is the keyword and the bid management that happens in those campaigns is going to be pretty different. With the liquidation campaign, you might be willing to spend a lot of money really quickly to liquidate and forgo any long-term storage fees. Whereas your other more profitable products, you might want to separate those. The same goes for audience keywords.
With the liquidation campaigns,
Yes,
Mike,
yes.
Now or potentially even a couple of weeks before now would have been a great time to implement that, because the next round of long-term storage fees are going to be August 15th. But then starting in September, long-term storage fees are going to become recurring monthly. So I expect to see a lot more liquidation campaigns out there as you try to get rid of that inventory at FBA warehouses, and try to sell through them so you don't get hit with these fees on a monthly basis. And Ryan, how do you handle, I know you have some apparel sellers and shoes, which are pretty seasonal products, and different products trend at different times of year. How do you handle seasonality as far as campaign structure goes?
Yeah, good question. So for our apparel guys that see anywhere from 60 to 70% of their business in the holiday season, generally Amazon's made it relatively easy for us, where they have Prime Day in July. August is when they enact long-term storage fees, and much to what was just said, they now are moving that to monthly. So what we generally do for apparel guys that have highly seasonal fall business is we'll start bidding high or increase budgets right before Prime Day, which then leads into excess being cleared prior to the long-term storage fees that happen in August. And then it leads up to the start of fall. So we try and get our sales ranks to the best possible place they can be right into the start of fall. And then as the start of fall happens, we then bring down our bids and bring down our budgets so that we're earning the profits that come with a holiday selling season. So we believe in starting in the summer, rolling into the start of fall, and then pulling back. That's generally what we do for stuff that is sustainable sales year over year over year. For the clearance, we go heavy throughout the entire fall. And then for the brand new stuff, we go heavy from the summer throughout the fall. So it's a little bit different based upon the product life cycle, like you guys are saying, but that's generally what we do.
Perfect. And you'll have to sort of figure this out for your own particular product, but you will see ebbs and flows pretty much across the board for most categories, and you just have to figure out when's the time to implement these campaigns and start targeting seasonal or liquidation strategies.
Yeah, so the last one is going to be based around audience keywords, and what we mean by this is starting to set up campaigns based on how shoppers are finding your products. And the reason why you may want to consider this is if you think about your manual campaigns, you're adding keywords to those daily or monthly or however you're going about that. Within that, you're going to have keywords that range in the cost and cost per click and their return, what their advertising cost of sale is. So to better manage that, if you're in a category that has really specific keywords and shopper search terms that really range, you want to start to break things up a little bit. A good example of this is setting up campaigns based on competitor search terms, branded search terms, or category search terms. And what is meant by that is competitor would be, if I'm a footwear brand, I would put all my competitor footwear keywords in a campaign. And I might do that because I might be willing to have a more defensive strategy and actually raising my bids to sort of combat with the competition and try to gain market share on their own branded products. Branded would be my actual branded footwear. So if I'm selling, Mike Indigaro's shoes, I would want, Mike Indigaro shoes, Mike Indigaro sneakers as my branded keywords. And why I might want to separate it that way is because those are my actual keywords. I may not be willing to invest as much, but I still understand as a brand that shelf space is important on Amazon, and I still want to bid for those keywords, but I just want to have a different budget set for it. And then lastly is your category specific keywords. So same example of the shoe industry. I'm putting things in there like sneakers, shoes, very broad terms that capture the demand of the market. But again, you're separating from the different strategies that you have. And all of this aligns to your budget. So in Seller Central, you're setting up a budget for your campaign, and you want to be able to feel confident that your budget is being taken up by keywords that fit within that strategy. So you wouldn't want to blend all these different keywords together that have different costs associated if you think or you can see from the data that that is skewing your results. So that's how you want to think about it. And at the end of the day, think about how shoppers are searching for your products, and that's where you can really get a little bit more technical in building out the campaigns. So still following that mirrored campaign structure. You're always starting with an automatic campaign, bringing that data over to the manual campaign. But instead of breaking out the campaigns by just product types, now these are recommendations to go a bit further based on how shoppers are searching for your products.
And this is something we've seen before in 1P advertising, right, Mike? It's been popular on Vendor Central if any of you have sold on there, but this kind of campaign structure also works for Seller Central and sponsored products.
Yep, that's right.
And this is something that you would recommend people set up from the get-go, or is this something that they should work on?
Yeah, this would be something that you would want to work on over time. And again, let the data tell you what to do. So, this strategy may not be implemented if you have similar data across these 3 different categories. Like if your competitor keywords are just as costly as the branded ones, you may not want to or may not need to diversify. But if you are seeing your competitor keywords are way more expensive than your branded versus your category, that's when you want to break things out. And we'll go even further into the details of why this is very closely aligned to your bidding strategy.
Perfect. Before we wrap up this section, Ryan, there's a question for you from one of our listeners. Geffen wants to know, when you mentioned going heavy on summer products, going back to the previous strategy on seasonality and liquidation, what kind of ACoS are you targeting when you go heavy? And is ACoS a metric that you're using to measure, or is there something else you're looking at when you're looking to invest in the summer?
Great question. I think we cover some ACoS target ranges based upon where those are, based on the product lifecycle a bit later in the deck. Am I correct?
Yeah, a little bit. But I guess the question is ACoS the metric you're looking at when you say you're going heavy, or are you looking, to invest to just get data and clicks and exposure?
Got it. Okay. So for a brand that's brand new, we're paying attention to the impressions because we're trying to build impressions. We're paying attention to the clicks based on the competitive keywords that we come up with, because we want to start to drive brand associations to like brands that we believe will longer term lead to sales. For something that is a sustainable product that we've been running, like for example, a Hanes sleep pant that's been running for 5 years, we're very focused on ACoS. That's probably the number one thing that we're focused on. And then for something that is a clearance, it's probably just ACoS and sales is what we're focused on, because we just want to get rid of it. We want to get rid of it as best we can and as soon as we can.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I think that to add to that is, with products that are so seasonally specific, we typically coach around not being so much focused on ACoS, but overall how that's moving the entire product on Amazon. So, you could certainly have a goal of 40% ACoS that you could drive up, but if you can actually see an incremental lift in the overall business by moving that goal even higher, then you may be willing to consider that. ACoS is just measuring spend over the ad sales contributed from that ad spend. And oftentimes what we're finding is, because a sale is considered a sale, whether it's coming from paid search through sponsored products or it's coming through organically, it's treated the same for Amazon's algorithm. So as a brand, you want to do as much as you can to push that top line revenue, and that might actually be raising, your requirements of what you feel is an appropriate ACOS. So again, it depends on the category, depends on the seasonality of the products, but think about the overall impact it's going to have on the brand.
Perfect. So this is going to lead us into the next strategy, which is reducing some of that wasted spend to increase profitability, and that's creating a negative keyword strategy that helps reduce wasted ad spend.
So let's start with first, what are negative keywords? So negative keywords are going to be keyword triggers that will prevent your ad from being shown on Amazon when someone searches for your product. And the reason why you want to do that is because oftentimes you'll find keywords that have a really high ACOS or don't even have an ACOS at all because they haven't converted into a sale and they just have tons of spend. What you can do is set up this blocker, which is a negative keyword, that when the next time someone does search your product, if you put a negative keyword up, it's not going to show that ad. And you want to do that because you don't want to be paying for searches and clicks that aren't going to convert in sales. Now you can still show up organically for that product, but what you're doing with a negative keyword is preventing the shopper from searching for that term and seeing your paid advertisement. So if you download your search term report, so if you go into Campaign Manager under Advertising, there's a really useful report called the Search Term Report. This gives you an export of all the search terms that have ever been searched for your campaigns. They give you a 60-day window that you can look back at. And what you want to be looking at in this sheet is sorting for spend and sales equaling 0. So what this is going to show you is all the shopper search terms that have gotten a significant amount of traffic, have spent a lot of your ad dollars, but have not actually converted into a sale. These would be your top priorities to make as negative keywords. So the first example, winter coat, you want to first see if that's relevant to the product. If it is not, you would want to add winter coat as a negative keyword, because if I scroll to the right, I see that $34 of my advertising dollars were spent to not produce a sale. So you want to look at that and say, okay, do you as a business owner want to continue spending that money or not? And if the answer is no, and you have substantial data, then you want to make that negative keyword. You do want to think about the data a little bit more than just spend and having no sales. So look to see how many impressions there are, clicks. Obviously, if you have a search term in there that has 5 impressions and 1 click, may not be the best time to add as a negative keyword yet. So come up with your own parameters of how much you're willing to spend. I typically will use a percentage of my total sales. So if you're willing to only spend, let's say, 75% of the sale price of the item, and I have, a $10 item, $7.50 would be my threshold for negating something. So that's a little best practice. And as a software company managing sponsor products, we have this data readily available in our platform. So this is replicating the action that you would actually take to do in our platform versus doing it manually. So what I just showed you was going to Campaign Manager, downloading the search term report, and then having to filter through that, finding the term, going back to Seller Central and adding it. In our platform, we just pull all that data here for you. We give you the same exact list, and you would just decide whether or not you want to negate that term right from that platform.
Ryan, question for you. When handling negative keywords and deciding whether or not to add them, what kind of criteria are you looking for?
Absolutely. So the thing that I love about the software currently is that it highlights all these, and it gives the number of impressions and the amount of time with which those impressions came in. So if you look at that middle part of the page to the left of the red box, and oftentimes when we open this up, automatically what you want to do is you want to click all the boxes and shut them down so you can save money and have a more appropriate use of those funds. But what we like to do is take a look at the time frame with which this has been pulling the information. So for that first example of suede boots, you know, maybe it's not enough of time to just say, okay, it's been going for 14 days or 2 weeks, and we should continue to run it for a bit more time to see if it will actually convert. You move a little bit further down and you see waterproof kid raincoat. That's been running for a full nearly month, yet it still has not contributed to sales, so we may shut that down. The other thing that it does for us is if we realize that a core product of ours, like suede boots, is not converting on a term like suede boots, there might be something wrong. There might be something wrong with the price that we're at. There might be something wrong with the listing. So we'll use that to take another look at that particular listing or set of listings and see, are we priced not at the right price relative to the market? Do we need to make some changes to the actual listing? So it not only highlights what you should be turning off, but it also gives you a better understanding of what you might want to look further into.
Perfect. And we have a question from David. When you add negative keywords, what's the difference adding as exact, phrase, or broad? What's the best to choose after seeing words in the search report that are not producing sales? That's a really good question, David. So with negative keywords, you have two options. You have either exact or phrase. You don't have the option of adding it as a broad. And we generally recommend using negative exacts. You have to be fairly confident that no variations of a search term are ever going to work for you before adding it as a negative phrase match. So to err on the side of caution, I would say use negative exact. And if a variation of that term does end up costing you spend and no sales, then you can always add that as a negative exact keyword as well. And we also recommend adding at the ad group level rather than the campaign level. Is that pretty?
Yeah, the exact same. I was just going to make a quick joke. I was surprised that Mike Indegaro shoes didn't come up as a negative search term because we've never had any return on those keywords.
I'm kind of curious to see the shoe line, Mike. You might need to develop it. Thanks. I can't say that I'll spend money for it, but I'd be curious to see. Perfect. So this leads us into sort of the inverse of that, which is using your search term data to create new keywords that you do want to target and have your ads placed for.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, so here we're going to talk a little bit about the explore and exploit strategy. So if you've ever seen any of our webinars or blog posts, you may have actually come across this explore exploit phrase. So basically, I would like to point out here that this is where the importance of having a mirrored structure really comes into play, because essentially, as Mike said earlier on, we're going to be using your automatic campaigns to identify those top performing customer search terms, and then we're going to be adding those search terms as keywords into your manual to really exploit that data and exploit that performance and capture all relevant impressions and clicks and sales. So this here, this is how you can identify those high-performing search terms within Seller Central's search term report. So here you can see we've highlighted Patagonia raincoat, as well as women waterproof rain jacket. You can see that these search terms were generated from the automatic campaign. And we can also see the amount of sales that these terms have brought in. So yeah, we can see that the sales are pretty high. You know, the women's raincoat has brought in about $400 worth of sales for us. So at this point, you would then manually add it into your manual campaign.
And is there a match type that you recommend starting with, Seth, for that?
Yeah. So when you're moving from automatic to manual, it's going to be added in from a broad match type added as a phrase.
Okay. And then we also have a little tip on the bottom. You know, if you see ASINs, which you can see a couple of examples on here, that means your ad displayed on the competitor's product page. So that's just an added benefit to running that automatic campaign in addition to using it to explore data and gather the right search terms.
Exactly. Awesome. All right, so next, so this is what it will look like within our Sponsored Products Optimizer platform. So a couple things to point out here. So you can see we've highlighted the conversion threshold. So basically what you're doing there is you are filtering, you're sort of refining your search based on the number of converted sales. So right now we have it set to 2+, so everything that is converted 2 or more sales will be showing up. So here, when moving auto to manual, our software will then negate that search term within the automatic and add it as a phrase match type within the corresponding manual.
So I've seen a few questions coming in about how to increase spend on campaigns. If you're trying to increase your spend, then you can leave off the auto negation and just continue running those terms in both campaigns. But if you're looking to focus more on the profitability aspect of it, then you want to negate it in your automatic and sort of focus on it with your manual. We also had a question from Rajesh about when you want to move from your automatic to your manual campaign. Rajesh, that kind of depends a little bit on your objective. We generally recommend 2 or more conversions, so you know that the conversion wasn't a fluke and it's a repeatable action. But in instances where you're trying to get more exposure and you just want as much data as possible, you could look at any search term that's ever converted for you and add that to your manual campaign as a keyword.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly recommend adding anything 1+ while you're in the initial discovery phase if you're new to the software. And then once you start moving towards like a profitability phase, then you can kind of filter that out and really refine it.
Perfect. And speaking of refining.
Yeah. All right. So this is where we're really starting to refine your campaigns and tailor to your targeted audience. So this is the next step after auto to manual. We can further refine your match type from broad to phrase, as well as phrase to exact. So we're going to be adding long tail keywords, which will narrow down your match type and can reduce your cost per click and also improve your conversions. So here's how it works. So, while long tail keywords usually do have a lower search volume, the goal here is to convert as many of these searches by bidding efficiently.
Yeah, so your goal really is to capture that market share. So even though 5 people might search for white ceramic mug versus 25 people that search for mug, your goal is to try and convert as much as possible on those 5 searches that do happen for the more specific search term.
Exactly. Yep. And yeah, we do have a little tip here. So yeah, to keep your ACoS down, use only phrase and exact match types in your manual campaigns, and let the automatic serve as your broad match. Cool. All right, and this is how you can refine your match type when using the Seller Central Search Term Report. So you can see here that we've highlighted these high-performing customer search terms that brought up your ad because the existing keyword is in the customer search term. So we would recommend adding this search term as a long tail keyword in addition to the existing keyword. Okay. And this is how you can do this within our SPO platform. So you can see here that the search terms and keywords will show up under the Targeting Improvements tab. We recommend going in here once a week, select all and make those changes. Just because, this is, we're finding the search terms that are really starting to refine your campaigns.
So a question from David on what match type is best for long tail search terms. So in this instance, David, it would depend on what you started with. So if you have, say in that example I just gave, porcelain mug as a phrase match, and you show up for the search term white porcelain mug, you now want to add white porcelain mug as an exact match keyword.
Yeah.
And so generally speaking, the more specific the search gets, the more likely it is that it's going to be an exact match type. And then once it's an exact, there's no further refinement necessary or possible there. So if you start off at, porcelain mug as a phrase, then your next variation of that would be an exact match.
Absolutely. And our software will sort of guide you. It'll say, whether it's going to be moved as a broad or a phrase or exact.
Exactly. Ryan, is there any strategy that we discussed today that maybe you don't implement, or anything additional that you do when manipulating keywords in your manual campaigns?
Generally, we follow all the guidelines that you said. The only one that I would probably go back to is waiting on 2+ conversions.
Okay.
I hope most of my team's not listening, because I've been telling them forever to just switch over on 1 conversion. So I believe switching over on 1 conversion and then letting the negate tool tell you in the future if and when you should shut it down. That's probably the only deviation that we do to what you guys outlined earlier.
Perfect. Cool. And then we have a question from Lay around the conversion threshold for targeting improvements. So I know we talked about doing 2 or more when you're moving from auto to manual. Would you recommend the same thing, Seth, for targeting improvements, or are you going to be a little bit less conservative? So if you have in targeting improvements a keyword that only has 1 conversion, would you still add it as an error match type?
I would, yeah. So you can't really, you would have to actually search and find the conversion. But I mean, we are sort of, these search terms are converting, and we're saying we're just creating a long tail. So there's no negating here. We're just adding additional words to a current keyword to really narrow down and better target towards your audience.
Yeah, I think you're okay doing it. You just have to keep those bids in mind, and we'll go into some of that bidding strategy in a little bit here.
Sure.
But before we dive into bids, talking about shifting campaign budgets and moving your money from one campaign to another.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I find when I'm working with sellers, I often get the question of, what do I do with my automatic campaigns once I've generated enough keywords? So basically, I recommend that you always leave your automatic campaigns running. For a couple reasons. Now, this is the only reason. This is the only way that you'll show up on a competitor's listing, and it's also a way that you can continuously find those new keywords. Now, so here's how you can reduce some of the spend as your products mature. So ACoS targets are the best way to control your spend. So for your automatic campaigns, you want to lower your bids, decrease the daily budgets, and in our SPO platform, decrease your ACoS targets based on the next step in your campaign's life cycle.
Ryan, you probably work with some substantial marketing budgets for your clients. I know you have a mix of them. If a client comes to you and gives you their marketing budget, how are you distributing this, and how are you deciding where to spend it?
Yeah, great question. So oftentimes we'll have a client come to us that will put the onus on us to figure out what's the best use of funds. And they may come to us and say, here's $5,000 for the month of August. You tell us the best way to spend it. Automatically, we keep the automatic campaigns running to the point that was earlier said. It's the only way that you can continue to seek and destroy, and it's the only way that you can stay on the competitive listing. So we ensure that we lift that, and we always buy that. The second thing that we'll do is we'll double down on the manual campaign words that we know historically have shown to do a great job of driving sales for us. Mm-hmm. And then we'll start to sprinkle in the other Amazon tools that you have. So, the second thing we'll look to do is potentially take a markdown on the product. So maybe spend $2,500 of that $5,000 on taking a discount. So instead of selling it for $100 at $100 MSRP, we may drop it down to $80 and see if we can juice the sales rank that way, along with the campaigns running. And then the third thing that we may do is we may sprinkle on a lightning deal or a best deal or a coupon. And you may say, why do you phase it in those three ways? Well, the reason is that our best performing buck in digital today across Facebook, Google, Instagram, Snap, and Amazon is Amazon sponsored products. So it's the best way to spend money today to drive actual sales. You have a captive audience that actually presses buy when you've got that Prime button. And then the second thing is taking a markdown because it's going to naturally generate some sales and value. And then third was the promotions, just because we haven't seen the most effective use of funds through coupons and best deals and lightning deals. So that's why we put them in that descending order of use if we're given a budget.
Got it. And when you say best performing, Ryan, for sponsored products ads over those other avenues, do you just mean ROI, return on your investment?
Yeah, I definitely mean ROI. And then secondly, you can put them up against Google, and you've seen the stat, whether it's 56% or 62% of product searches start on Amazon.com. Number two is Google. I'm pretty certain if your brand wants to be associated with the largest marketplace in North America, you're going to get more impressions through Amazon, the better dollar spent on Amazon.
Perfect. And this is going to sort of evolve over time as well, right? So you could start off your auto and manual campaigns if you're just creating them today with the same budget, and then over time start to reduce the budget on your auto and increase it on the manual.
Yeah, exactly. And as Ryan had mentioned, doubling down in the manual, that's where, you'd want to add to the budget and bid a little bit more and increase your ACoS targets.
Perfect. So speaking of ACoS targets, which if you're not familiar with that, that's a term we use in our software, and it's basically referring to how much you're willing to spend for a click. So a 20% ACoS target could mean that for every $10 that you make, you're willing to spend up to $2 on advertising. So we're going to go more into how you can change your bids and when you should be changing that by establishing a sound bidding strategy.
So to start, really want to understand what's a good default bid and what's a good starting point. So in Amazon, in Campaign Manager, of course you have Amazon suggested bids, which tell you a ballpark range of the bid prices for similar keywords. However, you really want to think about what's a good default bid for your products, and that's going to align more with how much you're willing to spend versus what Amazon's telling you to spend. And a good formula to calculate this is using your ACoS target, which is your percentage of how much you're willing to spend on ads for a given sale. So I'm going to use the example of, I'm going to sell Mike shoes again for you, Ryan, and I'm going to sell them relatively cheap. It's a $10 shoe. Whoa. So for this particular shoe, I'm going to have a target of 50%. So I'm willing to spend 50% of the sale price of my item on ads. So at a $10 product price, so 50% times 10, you're at $5. And then the last component of that is take your conversion rate. So if you're new to advertising, you can use your organic conversion rate, and you can find that in your business reports. But essentially, you would take the conversion rate and multiply that by those two metrics before. So ACoS target of 50% times product price of $10. And I've found that my shoes have a 50% conversion rate. That gets me $2.50 for my ad group default bid. So that's a simple formula to come up with, and that's going to be for you want to use the product prices and the conversion rates only of the products that sit within those ad groups or campaigns.
Yeah, and we're going to drop a link into the chat box. And this is an article in our Help Center that has the formula in it and works through an example as well if you want something to refer back to later and do this calculation for yourself. While we do that, Ryan, not everyone's going to have access to conversion rate, especially if they're first getting set up in sponsored products. What strategy do you and your team use to decide on a default bid?
Yeah, good question. So generally what we will do is if we have a brand that is just getting started, we will usually go towards the lower end of the target range to just start to get some data to understand if it's actually converting, how many impressions we truly will get. If we start to see no impressions when we're at the low end of the suggested range from Amazon, we'll start to move it up and we'll go no further than the midpoint of the range. Obviously that range is dynamic, so you're taking your shot in the dark at that one start, and then you have to go in and you have to evaluate if you need to adjust it up higher over the course of time. If there is no Amazon suggested bid, but we do have Google data as to what cost per click might be, then we will generally put that in. And if then we have nothing else, we'll start at a very small 25 cents and adjust from there, up or down.
Perfect. And then after that, you start making changes based on other metrics and performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So then once we start to get the data flowing, depending upon where that product is in its life cycle, whether it's brand new and we want to launch it, or we want to grow it, or we just want to sustain it for profitability, we'll make adjustments based upon the ACoS. And then, like I said before, if it's in the growth phase, it's all about impressions and understanding how much brand awareness we're receiving to like-for-like brands and what we've been buying.
Perfect. So Frank has a question about how do we find the industry conversion rates for our products? That's a really good question, Frank. And the information's not very readily available. What you'll normally see is sponsored products ads will have a higher conversion rate than your organic sales. You might see maybe around 5% conversion for organic and probably closer to 14 or 15 for sponsored ads. That's not really specific to a category though, so there could be some variation based on competition. But what that boils down to is you need to spend money on sponsored ads to get those sales and get that placement, but usually you should convert better as well because you're able to target the searches and the customers who are looking for your products and looking to buy. But continuing with bidding strategy, Mike.
Yeah, so once you have the correct default bids to start, you're really ready to start aligning your bidding strategy with your goals and actually start to change those bids. You want to keep a couple of things in mind when doing this, objective and performance. You don't really want to put yourself in a position to overbid or underbid. And what comes of that is going into Seller Central and randomly changing a keyword bid based on a couple of metrics. I typically see ACoS, but what you want to be able to do is set up your bidding strategy so that it aligns with your goals and the goals of those campaigns. So if you remember back from our earlier discussion, you want to be able to set up your campaigns by the different product types and objectives so that you can think about how much more you're willing to spend on campaign A versus campaign B. And that's where you can start to spend your budgets in those campaigns more strategically based on seasonality, trends in customer searches. And that would be really getting you towards understanding how much you're actually willing to spend. And once you understand that, you can actually go and start to change those keyword bids. So when should I lower or when should I increase a bid? So you want to start at your default bid and begin to analyze at least 30 days worth of performance. You can do this daily, you can do it weekly depending on how much time you have. But you want to start to lower bids where ACoS is higher than you're willing to spend. So if you have a campaign and you come up with your ACoS target that's 50%, and you're seeing a lot of keywords in there that are 70, 80%, you want to consider lowering those because you're not willing to spend that. You also want to lower bids when conversion rate is decreasing. So if you continue to get less clicks on your product or less conversion, so the people are clicking but they're not converting, you may not want to pay as much for that traffic, so you'd lower the bid. On the flip side, a couple of unique areas where you would increase bids is when conversion is increasing. So you want to actually increase your bids to capture this demand. So if more people are clicking, more people are buying, raise your bid so that you can capture that increase in traffic. And then lastly, you want to increase bids that are getting little traction, and this would be considered data discovery. Prior to about a few weeks ago, Amazon's reporting actually didn't allow you to see keywords that had little traffic and didn't have any clicks. So you would actually have to go into Seller Central in Campaign Manager and find those. Now you can actually export this report to see all the keywords that don't get as much traction. And that's a really big opportunity for you. What happens is a lot of these keywords can get lost in the shuffle. If you're a brand that's spending tens of thousands of dollars per month, that's going to be composed of hundreds, maybe even thousands of keywords. So increasing bids to increase your traffic exposure is always going to be something that you want to invest time in doing.
And how often would you recommend people evaluate and change their bids?
So I would do it daily if possible. You want to pay attention to the date ranges a little bit. So you certainly don't want to look at today or even yesterday's sales to inform a bid decision. The data is pretty inaccurate at that point because Amazon has a 7-day attribution, which means the shopper has 7 days once they click the product to actually purchase it for it to show up as a sponsored product sale. So always look daily if you can and look back at the last 30 days. And this is an example of what it looks like in our platform. So if you were to do this manually daily, it's a lot of work and a lot of math to go through and make these changes. We've created this bidding algorithm that sits in our platform that you would set up your ACOS target, so telling our system how much you're willing to spend, and our system does all the rest. And the cool part about it is we tell you exactly what happens. So you see in our platform a ledger of all the changes that are being made with the metrics behind it, so that you can be rest assured that changes are happening daily and you have the data there to actually go in and check to see what is actually happening in your Seller Central account.
Perfect. So this brings me to my last poll question of the day. I'd love to hear from you and see how you're currently managing sponsored products. So there's a few ways to do it. The most common way probably is just doing it directly in Seller Central and Campaign Manager, and that's the one that we see more often. Sometimes people might use the bulk ops file in there. A lot of people, of course, use agencies such as Ryan's, or sometimes people are involved with Amazon directly in pilot programs or 8-week campaign structure programs. Or you could be using us or another software to manage your campaign. So let us know what system works best for you. We'd like to hear from you on that. And then if you have any questions about any of the content we've covered so far, keep those coming in as well. I'm going to open the floor to Q&A in just a couple of minutes. Perfect. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes for people to respond to that poll, and then we will we'll close that out and share the results. Great. So I'm going to close that. Share results here. So it looks like most people are doing it directly in Seller Central, either themselves or using their team. The second most common looks like is software or just not currently managing it at all. So that's definitely not a strategy that we would recommend. Sponsored products campaigns do require management and constant upkeep. So if you need any help with that, definitely reach out to us. And we can help you figure out what you need to do next. But thank you so much for sharing that. And it's kind of coming towards the end of our webinar, but we just have a couple of things to share with you. So the first one is a beta list to join for our new upcoming product, Takeometrics Flywheel. Mike helpfully dropped a link in the chat box. So go sign up for that, and you can be top of the list to get early access to Takeometrics Flywheel. The other thing we want to highlight, we discussed our product a lot today. And the strategies that we discussed, apply either way, whether you're using our product or not. But if you do want to test it out, we have a 30-day free trial you could sign up for. So Mike dropped a link in for that as well. It's going to be right on our homepage. Just enter your email and your information to get started. And then once you sign up for a free trial, you could expect to hear from our team very shortly. So if you want to sign up for that today and talk strategy with our team, they'll reach out to you very soon. Perfect. And Now let's quite quickly wrap up the content that we discussed today. We had a lot of really good information, a lot of really great questions as well from the audience, which was good. And we just wanted to wrap this up for you. Going through the list here, Seth,
Yeah.
what do people need to take away from this webinar?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as Gary mentioned, we definitely covered a lot of content. So yeah, let's just quickly recap what we went over. So number one, not all campaigns will have the same goal or objective. So consider grouping your items by product type, life cycle, or audience. Number two, being aggressive with negative keywords will significantly reduce your spend. Number three, using the explore and exploit technique to capitalize on performing keywords. Excuse me. Number four would be we recommend to always leave automatic campaigns running. This is the only way for your ads to show up on a competitor's listing. And number five, calculate default bids using the formula and make continuous bid changes based on your performance.
Before we open up for Q&A, Ryan, is there anything else you'd like to add? Make sure our sellers know to have a profitable sponsored product campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I think we all know that running direct-to-consumer business, whether it's on a marketplace or it's on your own .com, it can be very labor-intensive. It can be very difficult to do. It's run 24/7, 365. And a thing to think about on sponsored products is it's a marketplace just like the product it sells in the marketplace. Bids are dynamic, competitors are dynamic, things change over time. So it's not just a set it and go. It's something that you need to continually pay attention to and adjust accordingly is the first thing. The second thing is what I believe and what I teach my team is our core competency or the value that we bring is based upon our ability to list product, manage product, operate the operations behind selling the product, but not necessarily marketing it. So it allows us to use a tool like Teikametrics to focus on what we're best at. And if you as entrepreneurs or brand owners or licensees believe that you're best at merchandising or selling product or listing product or creating new product, then why not outsource something to something that's a little bit more automated in terms of software like Teikametrics. So don't set it and just go, and it's a big ocean out there. So make sure that you are using some sort of solution that is going after this stuff.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. So I'm going to open up the Q&A section now. I know we're a little bit over on time, so if you want to stick around, get your questions answered, we'll be happy to do that. Do have a really good question that Andy asked earlier on in the webinar, and his question was, every time Amazon suggests we raise our budget, we do, and then a few days later suggest it again and again and again. What's a good way of determining a ceiling for your budget, and why does Amazon recommend those incremental budget increases instead of just telling you where you really need to be?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Andy. So from Amazon's side, the budget alerts in the raising budget come from you actually coming close to that budget or exceeding it. And what you really want to think about is changing and automating your bids so that you can maximize that budget more efficiently. So, Amazon, it has this one-sided, approach back to you to say, hey, we see that you're hitting your budget, increase it. But what they don't know is how much of those bids are actually helping you grow. So what you want to think about is your bidding strategy. I would say, always increase your budget if there's return. You don't really want to have a budget if you continue to increase sales at a profitable pace. But the budget is always going to provide a cap so that you don't overspend. So be comfortable with what you're setting for a budget in any given day. If it's $500, be okay spending $500. And if you are nearing up on that budget, start to calculate your bid amounts and seeing if you're maximizing that budget effectively.
Great. And then we have another question from a different Andy, asking to clarify what it means if an ASIN shows up in your search term report. Seth?
Yeah, so an ASIN shows up when your automatic ad is looked at from a competitor detail page. So if your ad is appearing on, let's say, Ryan's shoe listing under the sponsored product section, your ASIN would get captured, and that would show up in your search term report. The issue with that is you can't negate ASINs. So, if I continue to get ASINs popping up that are my competitors and they're spending all this money, you can't negate that specific ASIN number. But what you can do is start to look at that data and see if there's any opportunities for you to negate keywords that may be driving that traffic to that competitor versus yours.
Perfect. And then Sam has a question about, is it necessary to use any keyword tools?
I think the best keyword tool that you have is automatic campaigns. There's a lot of keyword scraping tools out there, but honestly, it's not about getting as many keywords as possible. It's about getting the right ones. And the best tool that you have as a seller is, again, shopper search data. And the only way to retrieve shopper search data that's actually going to impact your success is through advertising. So utilize automatic campaigns at the beginning of every launch to really understand that data and take that data and let that be the source of your manual campaigns and your keyword data.
Ryan, are there any instances you've encountered where you've decided to add keywords to a manual campaign to get that running, where maybe you search data from automatics?
Yeah, I generally completely agree with Mike. The only time I would say we seek other keywords using other tools, or we do the suggestive search within the Amazon toolbar. So if you type in, you can start to see what the top search terms are, is when we're short on time. So if we're playing catch up, or the product landed late, so the automatic campaigns couldn't go up into active because the product wasn't into the Amazon DCs, then we will go and find other keywords that we can start buying proactively. But generally, what we like to do is let the automatic do the hard work. Does that answer the question?
That does. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I think that wraps up our questions for today. If you guys have any others you think of, definitely reach out to us. I'd like to invite all of you to our next webinar as well. This is something different for us. We're actually hosting a webinar for the first time on advertising on Vendor Central. Most of our prior content has been around sponsored products and Seller Central. So if you sell on Vendor Central or are thinking about it or are curious, what in the world is Vendor Central, join us same time next week. So next Wednesday at 1 p.m. I'll be here with a different set of teammates of mine, teaching you how to advertise profitably on Vendor Central and get your 1P campaigns optimized. Perfect, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great to have you on here and to hear your insights. We definitely love to have you back. And thanks everyone for listening in as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Have a great day.